the definitions and the basics, let me tell you that I shall be moving on from the lowest level to the highest level possible, that is JEE Advanced. So make sure that you follow each and every video properly. The homework will also be. What is the basic definition of limits? First of all, let us try to understand. We have been given a x versus y axis, that is a coordinate axis. We have been given any function here. It is a decreasing function. It can also be an increasing function or whatsoever. How is limit defined? Like for example, the question has asked to find the limit, that is find the value of f of x at x tends to a. If x tends to a, it can tend to a from the left hand side or from the right hand side. There are two possible cases. It can go from here to here or here to here. Okay, so when we say that x tends to a from the left hand side, we write the expression as x tends to a minus. Okay, and if x tends to a from the right hand side, we would write that x tends to a plus. Why is that so? Because this quantity, that is a minus h, is less than a, and similarly a plus h is greater than a. So that is why plus and minus signs are used. What is the value of h? Value of h is basically a very small number. Very small number. Like for example, we can say that like h is equal to 0.000001. Like you used to take the alpha in ionic equilibrium, if you remember, that was very small. Similar kind of thing h is written here. Okay, now left hand limit kya hota hai? When x approaches a, from the left hand side x tends to a minus. Like for example, I've clearly represented the diagram here, that tends to a from the left hand side. Now a minus is basically a minus h as written from the diagram. So basically we represent the expression as limit h tends to 0 f of a minus h. Please understand the point, it is tends. Tends implies that it is not equal to 0 or it is not equal to a minus, but it tends to a minus. Very simple point, but I will tell you some questions that will make you realize the importance of this point. Next we have the right hand limit. When x approaches the a from the right hand side, that is this diagram which I have represented, you can see this diagram is represented here, then x tends to a plus actually occurs. A plus is equal to a plus h. Now limit h tends to 0, f of a plus h is the representation for this right hand limit. Now limit exists. Now this is the most important point for this entire chapter. One is this point, that is limit exists. One is the Leibniz method and one is the L'Hopital rule. Now see, limit exists if we have the left hand limit to be equal to the right hand limit. That is basically the f of a minus h should be equal to f of a plus h. Okay. But the important point to realize here is that it has no relation with the f of a. Like for example, if I would have asked that if limit exists at x is equal to 0, okay, at x tends to 0, I'm sorry, then it basically implies that f of 0 minus h should be equal to f of 0 plus h, but it doesn't matter that f of 0 pe kya ho raha hai. Okay, that is the logic which you need to understand. Now the question here is that you need to find out whether the limit exists or not. I'm directly beginning with the piecewise functions, not with those very simple questions like sine of x, cos of x. Okay, we are directly dealing with the questions here. So f of x is equal to 2x minus 1 for x belongs to 0 to 1 where 1 is not included, and x square where x belongs from 1 to 4 where 1 is also included. Okay, so first of all you need to understand that whenever you draw the graph for a polynomial or whatever, the limits for that would obviously exist at each and every point because that is a polynomial. Okay, so you can see that in these type of questions you need to check that where the function actually breaks. The function breaks at 1, you can see here we have 1 to be not included, but here 1 is included. So basically the function breaks at x is equal to 1 here, you can check it out. So we need to check the limit at the point x is equal to 1. Okay, I have written this point for you here. Now first of all we need to check for x is equal to 1 minus h and then x is equal to 1 plus h, because f of a minus h and f of a plus h. Now x is equal to 1 minus h, it implies that 1 se kam hai, the number is less than 1. So if the number is less than 1, that would lie in this particular range. Okay, because if the number is less than 1, that would lie in this here, and if the number is greater than 1, that would lie in this particular range. Okay, so that is how you need to decide the piecewise functions. So f of 1 minus h would be equal to 2 into 1 minus h minus 1, limit h tends to 0. Left hand limit would be equal to 2 minus 2h minus 1, and h tends to 0, so that can basically be taken to be equal to 0. So we get the value of the left hand limit to be equal to 1. Okay, in the examination obviously you will be directly going on from this point to this point. Okay, these definitions I've just written for you to understand. Now we are checking for x is equal to 1 plus h, the quantity is greater than 1. So the quantity is greater than 1 would lie in this particular piecewise function. So f of 1 plus h would be equal to 1 plus h whole square, limit h tends to 0. So from here the right hand limit where h tends to 0 would be equal to 1 square, which also comes out to be equal to 1. So left hand limit is equal to right hand limit, so it basically implies that the limit exists and the value is equal to 1. Okay, now let's move on to the next function where we deal with the greatest integer function. So the question has been asked to find the limit x tends to pi by 2 greatest integer function of sin x plus 1 minus greatest integer function of cos x upon 3. I have directly dealt with the greatest integer function because obviously many people are scared when they see the GIF or whenever they see the piecewise function. So I'm taking these type of functions from the initial method only so that you people don't get confused and terrified of these functions. So limit check करनी है. So first of all x tends to pi by 2. So first of all pi by 2 minus h पे check करेंगे, which is the left hand limit. That would be equal to sine of pi by 2 minus h plus 1 minus cos of pi by 2 minus h greatest integer function whole upon 3 का final GIF. Now see left hand limit sin pi by 2 क्या होता है? Sin pi by 2 is equal to 1. So if we take any angle which is basically less than pi by 2, even smaller quantity less than pi by 2, then the value of sine would be less than 1. Okay, first of all you know that this angle would be lying in the first quadrant. Pi by 2 minus h first quadrant में होगा, number would be positive, but that number would basically be less than 1. You all know that. So that is the greatest integer function of something which is less than 1 plus 1 minus greatest integer function of cos of pi by 2 minus h. Cos of pi by 2 कितना होता है? That is equal to 0. Now something less than pi by 2 would obviously give me the range to be less than 0. So we get the value of less than 0 and less than 1 greatest integer function which is equal to 0 plus 1 greatest integer function of something less than 0, that would be equal to minus 1 whole upon 3. So basically we get the final greatest integer function of 2 by 3 which is equal to 0. So the left hand limit comes out to be equal to 0. Similarly, I am giving the right hand limit as a practice to you. Once again, if you calculate the right hand limit by the very simple methods, try to think logically. Okay, try to see the quadrants as I've dealt here very properly. You would get the answer as greatest integer function of 1 by 3, which also finally is equal to 0. So that is equal to the right hand limit. Now once again the left hand limit is equal to the right hand limit. So it basically implies that the limit exists and it is equal to 0. The next function here is that limit x tends to minus 7 greatest integer function of x square plus 15 into greatest integer function of x plus 56 whole upon sine of pi by 7 into sine of pi by 8. This is a very important question because I will be telling you the difference between exact 0 and tends to 0. Okay, that thing अगर तुम्हें समझ आ गई, you will be solving the best JEE advanced level question which have come. Okay, so once again this denotes the GIF. इसको simplify किया, factorize किया, we get the value as greatest integer function of x plus 7 into greatest integer function of x plus 8 whole upon sine of x plus 7 into sine of x plus 8. Now we need to check the limit at x tends to minus 7. So first of all left hand limit देखो, left hand limit basically implies minus 7 minus h. So put that thing here, we get the value as minus 7 minus h greatest integer function plus 7 into minus 7 minus h greatest integer function plus 8 whole upon sine of minus 7 plus 7 minus h. Basically minus 7 minus h and plus 7 has been written. Similarly here also we have written sine of minus 7 minus h plus 8. Minus 7 minus something, उसका greatest integer will be equal to minus 8. So minus 8 plus 7 into here also we get minus 8 plus 8 whole upon sine of minus h, and here we get sine of 1 minus h. So you can see that left hand side limit is equal to, this is equal to minus 1. Okay, here we have this to be equal to exact 0. Minus 8 plus 8 is equal to exact 0 and not tending to 0. Please understand the point. Similarly here we have sine of minus h, so minus 1 and minus 1 would get cancelled. So sine of h is tending to 0 into sine of 1. Okay, Now you need to realize that we have exact 0 and not tending to 0. So obviously whichever quantity is multiplied by 0 is equal to 0. The limit left hand side comes out to be equal to 0. Similarly, when you calculate the right hand side limit for x tending to minus 7 plus, calculate it yourself, you would once again see we get an exact 0 in the numerator, which implies the right hand limit is equal to 0. So limit exists and it is equal to 0. Please don't start applying the L'Hopital rule here, differentiating and all that stuff, because we have exact 0. Agar it tends to 0 whole upon tends to 0 hota, then you should have thought about that, but it is equal to exact 0. So please fix this exact 0 point in your mind. Now we have some indeterminate forms. I've just written the forms here. We shall be dealing with those one by one in the multiple type of questions. Okay. We have tends to 0 whole upon tends to 0, tends to infinity whole upon tends to infinity minus tends to infinity, tends to 1 raised to power tends to infinity, and tends to 0 raised to power tends to 0. These are some indeterminate forms of limits which I have taken. We shall be dealing with the questions here. This is just an introduction. The homework for you is that to find the value of limit x tends to 0 plus sin x upon x का greatest integer function. So try to do this question. Mention in the comment section खुद से solve करके honestly without watching the next video in the first year calculus. Okay. So f of x has a lower bound if there exists a number a such that f of x is greater than equal to a. Like for example, I want to take the function f of x is equal to some sin x. Sin x को दिमाग में लो. That has the lower bound because it has a number minus 1. Minus 1 is the lower bound for the sine function because sine of function is always greater than equal to minus 1 for all values of x belongs to domain. So that is an example which you can keep in your mind. Similarly, f of x has an upper bound if there exists a number b such that f of x is less than equal to b for all values of x in the domain. Like for example, sin x example here. So that is always less than equal to 1. Okay, so that is the upper bound which I am talking for that particular function. But these are the lower bounds and the upper bounds. If you want to say that the function f of x is a bounded function, इसका मतलब क्या होगा? F of x is said to be the bounded function if we have a to be less than equal to f of x is less than equal to b for all values of x belongs to domain. So basically it means that we should have the function to be less than a to be greater than equal to a and less than equal to b. Very simple example, sin x once again. If you see that that function is always greater than equal to minus 1 and it is always less than equal to 1. The graph of the bounded function f of x which lies between y is equal to a and y is equal to b has been shown to you in this particular figure. You can see that this is a function which has been given to you. Between a to b it lies. So it is a bounded function. Okay. Now what is a very important note which I wanted to discuss here, that limit x tending to a. These type of questions are very important from advanced point of view. That if I say we have been given the multiplication of two functions f of x and g of x, so limit x tends to a if g of x is a bounded function for all the values of x belongs to domain where the domain is g of x and limit x tends to a f of x is infinitesimally small. You need to understand this point from here that we have been taking the domain for g of x but the f of x which we are taking is very small, infinitesimally small matlab बहुत small quantity. Then limit x tending to a f of x into g of x is equal to 0. What is the example here? These type of questions are very common. Try to understand and think very well. You have been given to find the value of limit x tends to infinity e raised to power minus x into sine of x. Now the thing to realize from here is that you can see that limit x tends to a f of x into g of x. f of x क्या है मेरे पास? e raised to power minus x. g of x क्या है मेरे पास? g of x is basically equal to sin x. So the thing to realize from here is that you can see that sin of x is a bounded function. You know, g of x is a bounded function, that is sin of x is a bounded function. Already dealt with the example here. If x tends to infinity, that is x is a very large number, you can clearly realize from here that e raised to power minus infinity would tend to 0. So that condition is also satisfied that limit x tends to a, that is x tends to infinity, f of x which is basically e raised to power minus x is a very small number. So that is a very small number because it tends to 0. So that is why we get that limit x tends to infinity, e raised to power minus x into sin x would basically be equal to 0 using this very important note. Okay, very important question this is. I hope this is clear. The second question here is that find the value of limit x tends to 0 x square into sine of 1 by x. So we have sine of 1 by x which I have written here, which is basically a bounded function. Okay, now x tends to 0, so इसका मतलब क्या हुआ, x tends to a basically, then x square tends to 0. You can see the first function is infinitely small, so you can see that it is infinitely small. The second function, that is g of x, is a bounded function, that is sine 1 by x. X चाहे कुछ भी हो, the value of sine would always lie between -1 and 1. So we get the graph of x square into sine of 1 by x to be this one. It can be plotted with the help of a computer. So we get the limit, which totally implies from this particular part to be equal to 0. Similarly, in the last question also we have drawn the graph with the help of the computer, and the graph comes out to be equal to this one. Okay, so I hope that the logic is very clear. This is the point which I have taken, a very important point. Please note it down in your notebooks. This is a very important one. The next note here is that this is the most important thing in the entire limits chapter. Okay, because if these type of question comes, people answer that limits exist nahi kar raha hai, yeah, all that other stuff. But you need to understand that for a limit to exist, that should lie on the domain, in the domain. So basically, if f of x limits x tends to a, if one side of the limit doesn't lie inside the domain of f of x, then the limiting value of the f of x is same as the limiting value of the other side of the limit. So basically, what does it mean? Let us try to understand with the help of an example here. जो example तुम्हें मैंने homework में दिया था, that will make it more clear. Okay, before that, please understand this point. What is the point here is that, see, like for example, a question has been given, find the value of the limit some f of x where x tends to a. Okay, now limit find करने के लिए हमें क्या क्या पता होना चाहिए, f of a minus h and f of a plus h. Like for example, the question is find the value of the limit, note it down, find the value of the limit x tends to 0 root of x. Okay, so ये question अगर मैं तुम्हें देता हूँ, so you can clearly understand that 0 minus h wouldn't exist, that is f of 0 minus h wouldn't exist, because negative of a root, negative number का root isn't possible in the real plane. So that is why we need to only calculate the right hand limit, that is the 0 plus h for the question if it would have been given to you. So that is the logic which I am using here through this point. Now this was the question which was given to you as the homework in the previous video. Find the value of the limit x tends to 0 plus sine of x whole upon x का greatest integer function. Okay, so you can see from here that the value of x is greater than 0 because x tends to 0 plus, so basically it implies that the value of x is greater than 0. Also x would be greater than sine x, which clearly implies that the value of sine x upon x would be less than 1 because x is greater than sine x. So if we take x on the other side, we can divide it because x is greater than 0. So it can be dealt, I have dealt in the basic mathematics part, that whenever we have the quantities to be greater than 0, we can take that in the cross multiplication. So we get sine x upon x to be less than 1 from here. Now sine x upon x is basically equal to 1 minus h. This function is less than 1. Less than 1 matlab kya? We can take this to be 1 minus h. So limit x tends to 0 plus sine of x whole upon x, the greatest integer, can be substituted at limit x tends to 0 plus greatest integer of 1 minus h. So 1 minus h matlab kya? Quantity which is less than 1, which turns out to be equal to 0. Now the homework for this video is that please do the homework very honestly, okay, because a lot of effort goes in making the videos. So homework अच्छी तरह करो, तभी तुम्हें you will get success. If limit x tends to minus 1 by 3, come minus, that is 1 minus 1 by 3 minus h basically, 1 by x into minus 1 by x का greatest integer function, the value of this limit comes out to be equal to z. Find the value of z where this denotes the greatest integer function. Okay, so please let me know on the limit. Okay, if you take the limit x tends to 0, greatest integer f of x, that would be a different question. Okay, I'll make you understand at the end of this question that what is the meaning which I have told you. So first of all, let us try to find out the limit x tends to 0 f of x. So limit x tends to 0 minus f of x, first of all we'll find the left hand limit basically. So that is equal to limit x tends to 0 minus 0 minus means that some quantity which is less than 0. So less than 0 implies it would lie in x plus 1 by 2. So that is equal to 0 minus h plus 1 by 2, which will be equal to 1 by 2 minus h. So we all know that we take the value of h tends to 0 basically. So h tends to 0 would give me the value of left hand limit to be equal to 1 by 2. Now if we take the right hand limit, that is limit x tends to 0 plus f of x, that is equal to 2x plus 3 by 4, because we need to take some number which is greater than 0. So greater than 0 kya ho jayega, would lie in this particular thing. So that will be equal to 2x plus 3 by 4. So 2 into 0 plus h plus 3 by 4. So that basically comes out to be equal to 3 by 4 plus 2h, which is equal to 0. So right hand limit is equal to 3 by 4. Okay, now what people will do, left hand limit dala isme. So we get the value of greatest integer function, that is equal to greatest integer function of 1 by 2, which is equal to 0. Similarly, greatest integer function of 3 by 4 is also equal to 0. So people will write that limit exists and is equal to 0, but the truth is that the limit only does not exist. तो लिमिट एग्जिस्ट नहीं कर रही है बिकॉज द एग्जैक्ट लेफ्ट हैंड साइड लिमिट is not equal to the exact right hand side limit. So basically the value of this thing would be equal to not defined, or basically nothing, that is phi. Phi means an empty set. Okay, because left hand limit isn't equal to the right hand limit, so limit does not exist, but many people would write this answer to be equal to 0. Okay, so please make sure you've understood the concept behind it. The next question here is that is a mixture of modulus and GIF functions. You need to find the value of limit x tends to 3 minus f of x, where f of r to r is defined by f of x is equal to greatest integer function of x minus 3 plus modulus of x minus 4 for x belongs to r, where this function denotes the GIF. Okay, so this is the what we say GIF function, and this is the modulus function. So first of all, limit x tends to 3 minus f of x would be equal to, now this question has been taken to teach you the property of the distribution of limits. Like for example, this is some, let me say g of x, this is some h of x. So this function is totally basically f of x. So we have got limit x tends to 3 minus f of x, which has been written in this particular manner. So if I say that this function is equal to g of x, this is equal to h of x, then limit can be equally distributed on the g of x and h of x. Okay, so we can distribute the limit in the similar manner, like ye agar hota d by dx, so d by dx can be distributed equally on the other functions. Similarly, limit can also be distributed on the functions. So we get limit x tends to 3 minus greatest integer of x minus 3 plus limit x tends to 3 minus greatest integer of x minus in what we say modulus of x minus 4. So now substituting the values, we get 3 minus h, because 3 minus matlab 3 minus h minus 3 ka greatest integer, plus we get modulus of 3 minus h minus 4. So isko cancel kiya, we get the value as greatest integer of minus h plus modulus of minus 1 minus h for h tends to 0. So h tends to 0 matlab kya? So we get minus 0 point something, like 0.00001. So that would basically be a quantity which is less than 0. So that would be equal to minus 1 as the greatest integer. Similarly, here we get the value as greatest, we get the value as modulus of minus 1. So that will be equal to 1. So basically the limit comes out to be equal to 0. That is the left hand side limit comes out to be equal to 0. The next question is a very important one. Okay, because this will teach you the logic that how to make the limit for the unknown functions to be to exist. Okay, so find the set of all values of x such that the function is non-zero and a finite number. So basically what I mean to say here is that this is some function which has been given to you, that is 1 by 1 plus something. Here we have been given that n belongs to a natural number, but n tends to infinity, like it's a very huge number basically. So I want you people to make sure that this function is equal to non-zero, the limit is non-zero basically, and it is a finite number. Okay, so what is the set of values of x? So let us try to see. So the first point which we can clearly note from this particular thing is that limit n tends to infinity, but since n belongs to a natural number like 1 2 3 4 5 6 like that, so you can see that 4n would obviously be an even number. So that is the first thing that comes to our notice. The second thing we can note from it is that whatever be the inside quantity, if that is raised to an even number, then the quantity will always be positive. Okay, so we are getting 1 by 1 plus something positive. Okay, now this positive quantity is there, so we have understood that thing. Now thus the value of 4 tan inverse 2 pi x whole upon pi should belong from -1 to 1, because if it belongs greater than that, then we have the sufficient chances of this particular thing. Like for example, if you take this value, inside value, let me say that comes out to be equal to 2, अगर वो 2 आती है, so 2 raised to power infinity would basically be equal to infinity. So we get 1 by 1 plus infinity, that once again is equal to 0. So we get the answer as 0, but the answer should be non-zero. So we want this inside quantity to only belong from -1 to 1 included. -1 and 1 are included because even if we take -1 inside, that is -1 raised to power some even number, we get 1 by 1 plus 1 only. So that is a finite number and that is non-zero. Very good question. Okay, so basically this quantity should belong from -1 to 1. So we get this is 4 and pi. We multiply all the sides with the help of pi by 4, giving me minus pi by 4 and pi by 4 on the either sides, and this gets cancelled out, giving me the value as tan inverse 2 pi x. Taking tan on all the sides, so tan inverse minus pi by 4 is equal to -1. So we are taking tan on both the sides, so we get tan of minus pi by 4 to be equal to -1. Here tan inverse and tan would get automatically cancelled, giving me 2 pi x. So tan of pi by 4 would be equal to 1. Dividing by 2 pi on all the sides, we get -1 by 2 pi to 1 by 2 pi. Okay, so the answer would be this, which is the correct answer for this particular question. Very good question. I hope each and every question is teaching you something new along with the definition of a new concept. Okay, now the homework from the previous video. I'm actually very happy that a lot of people are actually doing the homework very well. So please continue this. I'm watching all the comments, but I'm not able to reply to all of these. But I'm seriously seeing that like for this question only, I was seeing that there were comments regarding -6, -9, or all that stuff. So make sure you are solving the question whichever is given to you as the homework. Homework था limit x tends to -1 by 3 का minus 1 by x into greatest integer function of -1 by x. You need to find the value of this particular limit, that is the left hand side. Now x is less than -1 by 3 because -1 by 3 का minus है ये. So it basically implies if we take the reciprocal, 1 by x is greater than -3. So -1, so 2.9 का तुम greatest integer function लोगे, so that would be equal to 2. Okay, so that is the thing which I have done here. When x tends to -1 by 3 minus. Okay, now limit x tends to -1 by 3 minus 1 by x into the greatest integer function of -1 by x. Now this thing is basically -1 by 3. Sorry, this thing is basically 1 by minus of -1 by 3. That comes out as -3. This thing comes out as 2. So we get the value as -6. Homework for this video is you need to find the value of the limit x tends to infinity, x minus log to the base e raised to power x plus e raised